There comes a moment in every person's life when everything they thought they understood about themselves starts to fall apart. It doesn't always happen through a dramatic collapse or some loud explosion that everyone can see. Sometimes, the breaking is quiet. Sometimes, the pieces fall in slow motion. Sometimes, the life you were living simply stops fitting you, like a shirt you've outgrown but kept wearing because it was familiar. And before you even realize what's happening, you find yourself standing in the wreckage of what used to be your story, looking at the fragments and wondering where to begin. People talk about starting over, as if it's simple, as if rebuilding yourself is just a matter of determination, willpower, or a few motivational quotes. But the truth is far more complex. Rebuilding yourself isn't about becoming someone new. It's about meeting the version of you that's been quietly waiting underneath all the noise, all the expectations, all the wounds, and all the masks. And the psychology behind that rebuilding process is not clean or easy. It doesn't follow a straight line. It feels messy, uncomfortable, disorienting. You question everything: your past, your choices, your identity, even your worth. You find your strength in places you didn't want to look. You discover your blind spots. You uncover truths that were buried under years of survival mode. Because rebuilding doesn't start with strength. It starts with honesty. It starts with the moment you say, "I can't keep being who I was anymore." And that moment, even if it feels like a breakdown, is actually the beginning of breakthrough. But no one tells you that the beginning of rebuilding often looks like losing everything, including yourself. Maybe you felt it recently. Maybe something collapsed. A relationship, a plan, a dream, a version of your identity you were attached to. Maybe you woke up one day and realized you didn't recognize the person in the mirror anymore. Maybe life forced you to stop pretending you were okay when you weren't. Or maybe nothing big happened at all. Maybe you just reached your internal limit. That quiet breaking point where your soul whispered, "No more." And because the world doesn't slow down for your healing, you still had to move through your days as if everything was normal. But inside you were unraveling. Inside, something old was dying, and something new was trying to be born. Rebuilding yourself always begins in that private, unseen space. That space where your heart is tired, your mind is overwhelmed, and your spirit is begging for a reset. What people don't understand is that rebuilding requires unlearning. You have to unlearn the habits you created to survive. You have to unlearn the patterns that were taught to you, even if unintentionally. You have to unlearn the version of yourself that was shaped by fear, by pressure, by trauma, or by people who couldn't love you properly. That unlearning is painful, because it feels like letting go of pieces of yourself. But those pieces were never truly you. They were adaptations. They were armor. They were responses to environments that didn't support your growth. The psychology of rebuilding means realizing that the self you're losing was never the self you were meant to keep. And that realization hits hard. It hits on quiet nights when your mind won't stop replaying memories you're trying to forget. It hits in the mornings when your chest feels heavy before the day even begins. It hits in the conversations where you can no longer force yourself to agree with things that don't align with who you're becoming. Growth has a way of pulling you forward and making everything that doesn't match your evolution feel suffocating. The problem is, we cling to the familiarity of old pain because we're terrified of stepping into unfamiliar healing. Your mind would rather stay with what it knows, even if it hurts, because uncertainty feels dangerous. But rebuilding yourself requires you to walk straight into that uncertainty and trust that there's something better waiting beyond the discomfort. And this is where the psychology becomes powerful. Your identity is not fixed. The person you were 5 years ago is not the person you are today. And the person you are today is not the final version of you. Human beings are wired for reinvention. Your mind is constantly reshaping, rewiring, and reorganizing itself based on your experiences, your reflections, and your choices. Neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to adapt, is active every single day, which means you're not stuck. You're not trapped. You're not defined by your past. You have the capacity to rebuild from the inside out, regardless of what broke you. But rebuilding doesn't start with changing your life. It starts with seeing yourself differently. You have to learn how to sit with your emotions instead of running from them. You have to learn how to listen to your discomfort instead of numbing it. You have to learn how to forgive yourself for the mistakes you made while you were still learning how to survive. You have to learn how to stop abandoning yourself when things get hard. And maybe, the biggest part, you have to learn how to believe that you deserve a life that doesn't break you. Because rebuilding yourself isn't just about rising, it's about understanding why you fell. When you're in the rebuilding stage, the world often feels quieter. You distance yourself from noise. You lose interest in things that once distracted you. Your priorities shift. Your conversations become deeper. You crave meaning instead of approval. You want peace more than attention. You become more protective of your energy. And people might misunderstand this shift. They might think you're pulling away or becoming cold. But you're not. You're simply choosing yourself. Maybe for the first time in your life. When you're rebuilding, self-preservation becomes a natural instinct. You begin to treat your mind like something worth protecting, not something to push until it collapses. You learn the difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness hurts. Solitude heals. And in that solitude, you begin to meet the parts of yourself you once ignored. The quiet strength. The intuition you silenced. The creativity you suppressed. The boundaries you never set. The dreams you buried because you thought they were too unrealistic. Healing gives you clarity, and clarity gives you direction. You start to see that rebuilding yourself isn't about becoming perfect, it's about becoming real. It's about living in alignment with the truth, instead of running from it. It's about creating a life that feels like yours, not one that pleases everyone else. But let's be honest, the rebuilding phase also comes with doubt. You question whether you're doing the right thing. You worry about losing people. You second-guess your decisions. You wonder if you're strong enough to keep going. And sometimes, you slip back into old patterns because the new ones haven't fully formed yet. But falling back for a moment doesn't erase your progress. Healing isn't a straight line, it's a spiral. Every time you come back to the same lesson, you're experiencing it with more awareness, and that awareness is proof that you're evolving. The psychology of rebuilding says, growth is not about perfection, it's about repetition. Small shifts, repeated over time, create transformation. Something changes inside you the moment you finally accept that you have outgrown who you used to be. You stop chasing the things that drain you. You stop explaining yourself to people who refuse to understand you. You stop apologizing for wanting more. You stop shrinking to fit into spaces that can no longer hold the person you're becoming. This is where rebuilding transforms from survival into rebirth. Not the loud kind, but the silent, steady kind, that happens one internal shift at a time. And slowly, you begin to rise. Not all at once, not dramatically. More like a sunrise, gradual, patient, unstoppable. You make small choices that align with your healing. You distance yourself from what triggers you. You create boundaries that protect your emotional stability. You surround yourself with people who feel peaceful, not chaotic. You become more intentional with your time. You learn to rest without guilt. You start trusting your intuition again. You stop searching for validation outside yourself. This is where rebuilding becomes powerful. When you finally understand that you are responsible for the life you allow yourself to live. There's something profoundly liberating about realizing that you don't have to go back to the person you were before the pain. You're not supposed to. That version of you didn't know what you know now. That version of you tolerated things you would never accept today. That version of you didn't have the wisdom, the perspective, or the strength you're now developing. Pain didn't break you, it revealed you. And the version of yourself that is emerging now is someone the old you never had the courage to become. And maybe that's what rebuilding is really about. Learning to trust your becoming. Trusting that losing certain people was necessary. Trusting that letting go of certain habits was essential. Trusting that closing certain chapters wasn't a failure, but a redirection. Trusting that the pain you went through was shaping you, not destroying you. Trusting that you're not behind in life, you're unfolding at your own pace. You begin to realize that everything you're rebuilding is rooted in intention now. Your peace, your boundaries, your relationships, your identity, your goals. You're no longer moving blindly. You're no longer chasing illusions. You're no longer sacrificing your mental and emotional well-being for the sake of appearing strong or put together. Rebuilding yourself means you're finally choosing a life that is sustainable, a life that supports your inner world instead of tearing it down. And slowly, As you transform, your environment begins to shift. New people enter your life, not because you're lucky, but because you're aligned. Opportunities appear, not because things magically change, but because you're finally giving yourself permission to pursue them. You begin attracting experiences that match your healed self rather than your wounded self. This is the psychology of rebuilding. You don't attract what you want, you attract what you believe you deserve. And when you start believing you deserve better, life starts moving accordingly. One day, without even realizing it, you'll look at yourself and notice the difference. You'll notice the strength in your voice, the clarity in your decisions, the softness in your heart that doesn't feel like weakness anymore, the calm in your mind that feels earned. You'll notice the peace you feel in your own presence. You'll notice how far you've come, not because someone else pointed it out, but because you can feel it in your bones. You'll realize that rebuilding yourself didn't just change your life, it changed your identity. It reshaped your self-concept. It awakened the version of you that was always meant to exist. And when that moment comes, you'll understand why everything had to fall apart. You'll realize that the life you were trying to hold on to was too small for you. You'll realize that certain endings were actually beginnings in disguise. You'll understand that the pain was part of the clearing, a necessary destruction to make room for the person you're becoming. Rebuilding yourself requires patience, courage, responsibility, and honesty, but most of all, it requires a willingness to let go of who you were in order to embrace who you're meant to be. This is the psychology of rebuilding. You don't rise by force, you rise by alignment. You rise by clarity. You rise by self-awareness. You rise by choosing yourself, again and again, until your life finally matches the truth of who you are. And when you finally rebuild yourself, not the old self, not the wounded self, not the survival self, but the true self, you'll realize that you didn't just heal. You transformed. You returned home to yourself. And nothing is more powerful than that.